This is a MapleSoft digital education podcast.
In North America, cost of education is a major issue. Our model is that the student typically, without support, pays a good portion of the education. And by our model, I'm talking more maybe U.S.-based. Canada's a bit closer to Europe. But is that an issue? Is the cost of education an issue in Europe generally, or in Holland in particular?
I think we have a pretty good, so the costs are not too high. And there was a time that everybody got a scholarship. So if you want to attend university, that would not, you would also, everybody would receive a scholarship. And depending on the income of your parents, you could get a loan. So that has changed, and people were very much concerned, and students were concerned whether they would start studying. But it's so far, I think that system is in place like 3 years from now. So everything is a loan, although the interest is very very low, close to zero.
Way it should
so
be.
Far, it doesn't really seem to be an issue. But if you come from education is free to now you build up a debt. So for some students it will be one thing more to think about.
Yeah.
But on the other end, we've not seen that many drops in applications to universities.
Okay, and hope, I mean, there is, you want to probably pay enough to appreciate, you probably appreciate more what you pay for. But on the other hand, probably the number one investment countries should be making in their youth is education. So you really want to find that maximum. You want it to be appreciated, but no better investment can be made by a country or a region. So
as long as students have the feeling that by doing this investment, I make sure I have a job. If that would be an issue, like will there be a job after I finish my my studies, I think that would be more of a threat. Then as long as I do this investment, but in the end I'll have a good job and I can develop myself, then we'll be fine. I think most of the students will make that investment. But as soon as they get in doubt whether they get a job afterwards.
You've touched on a very sensitive debate here in North America, where many educators would feel that, especially at the higher level, the university level, that the number one, their purpose in life is not to necessarily prepare a student for a job, but to make them a contributing member of society. Education for education's sake. Now, and I think part of that debate is maybe different in different subjects. I mean, if your interest is to, first of all, I think you're absolutely right that the economic equation should make sense. You shouldn't go $500,000 in debt for something that you're never going to make more to pay that back. But probably a good portion of it is the subject that you pick to study. I mean, some subjects are there's a much larger job pool at the end, and other ones are not. Doesn't mean that the education process is less, beneficial, but it's less economically rewarding.
Yeah, and for some students it will not be the issue, and for some studies, but in the end, if you have an education on a university level, that is still counts for something. So, of course, not all of us want to go for the big money, but just being able to get a job because of what that you studied. Like, what my dad always says, do something in STEM because that's the future, and you'll be sure of a job. Well, at the moment I'm working. I didn't think that I would be doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah,
But
it's hard to
still,
predict the future.
it is hard. I don't think even my job would have existed by the time that I graduated. I don't think I could have stepped into this job right away.
Yeah, some of education is learning how to learn too. So
Yeah.
it makes you, I think, a bit more flexible. Any type of education. Maybe I just wanted to touch on, and I'll let you go soon, but touch on with digital education, or with having a lot of assets online and online testing, we have the ability of gathering a lot more analytics and data on how students are moving through the education process. And I think it allows the possibility of comparing materials and education process. What are your views? Like, how do you see, how important do you think utilizing the measurements are? How good do you think we're going to get at determining if someone has actually learned something? Do you believe in competency-based, education, where you learn a subject and you move step by step? What are your views on how education measured or analytics will affect the future?
For what I know, that our students are a little bit hold back on measuring their accomplishments. And that is more that they feel like they're being rushed through their studies, like you should perform like this, or you should be in that part of the results, because otherwise we say you're not doing well enough, so we'll put you aside. So that's what I hear from students, that they are kind of hesitant to, and I must say I agree with them, because I think at least for the discussions I've heard so far, it is about giving feedback to the students, like here you are, and make sure you come out of this danger zone. On the other hand, if you use the analytics to really see what kind of materials work with what kind of students, I think it can be very useful and helpful for the developers with path to go on. But I'm a little bit reluctant to I think the focus for what I see is mostly on tracking how the student's doing and just giving them feedback. You should work harder, you should go through your studies quicker, more efficient. And if I look back on my own studies, then my first year was great. I almost got all my courses, and the second year was very bad. If that had been my first year, I would
been your
not.
last year.
It would have been my last year. So I kind of compensated that again in my third year. But what if at that point the rules, because right now you in Holland you need to get a minimum of your points in the first year, and otherwise you must stop. In my time that was not the case, so perhaps that's why I got to continue and really picked up on that, what I missed in the second year. But I'm very curious what would have happened to me if we all had all these systems in place. Would they just have said, well, don't think you're doing a good job now, so
you're right,
please move.
there is a negative. I mean, I think the amount of measurement and analytics, insight, we'll say, is coming. But you're bringing up a valid point. I think there's a good side and a bad side of that. The good side, if you can use that information, that data, to improve the educational process, give it more flexibility, more adaptable, like that's all. I don't think anyone would argue that's bad. But if it's just another whip to whip students, or there's an old saying that we in North America that you motivate people with a carrot and a stick. But you got to make sure that you don't beat them with the carrot. So you don't want it to all be pushing. And the good side of that, and hopefully we get to it, where if someone learns differently, and potentially even slower, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're at a lower depth, that they are allowed more time. They're more flexible. But the point you bring up, I think, is perfectly valid. We're going to have all this data. There's probably good ways to use it, and there's equally bad ways to use it. And I agree with you that if it's just to push more students through the pipe
Yeah.
as a sausage maker of some type, it's not a good way.
Yeah.